I want to start by talking about what it takes to be an entrepreneur and who you might be, whether you're an entrepreneur or you know someone or you may work with someone who's entrepreneurial. My guess is that many of you are entrepreneurial. You just might not know the path that it might take you in. Therefore, you're risk adverse and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't really want to take on this level of risk. I would rather do something else besides taking on risk. Well, an entrepreneur is that person that's willing to take on risk, and typically it is risk that is a calculated risk. It is an informed risk, which suggests that there might be opportunities for success. You can do entrepreneurship as an individual. You can also do what's called corporate entrepreneurship. And in corporate entrepreneurship, what you have is something like an example of the 3M executive, Mr. Fry, who came up with the idea for the adhesive that wasn't sticking very well, and it became known as the sticky notes. And it's so entrepreneurship is looking for those things that would make you be successful and make a product be successful, but sometimes you might have to think of the product in a different way. For Mr. Fry, Art Fry, that meant that while he was trying to look for a polymer adhesive that would really work to hold something together, he came up with an idea of what could you do with an adhesive that doesn't work so well, and that's how the Post-it note came to be. Or it could be something as simple as a permanent marker and using that permanent marker to write something. But what if you didn't have a permanent marker? What could you do with it? And that bore out to be the dry erase marker. So enterprising ideas come and go. Innovations, creative ideas are often born of the concept of what if we were to do something. So there are different groups of individuals out there in society, and each one of them looks at entrepreneurship in different ways. The economists would typically look at an entrepreneur and think of what it would take to bring an innovation to the forefront. How much labor would it cost? And what kind of materials would there be? What resources would have to be utilized to make this entrepreneurial idea come to fruition? Whereas a psychologist would look at it and say, does that person have the motivation to achieve? Can they control what's going on? Can they experiment? Will they experiment? A sociologist would look at entrepreneurship and think to themselves, well, what kind of impact would this particular product have on a community, on a culture? And would it be a positive impact? And then we have the anthropologist, somebody who would think of the entrepreneur as someone who recognizes opportunity, the person that looks to see economic opportunity and then acts upon it. And then we have managers and business people who are willing to introduce new ideas for products, services, and processes are in all the way across the markets. So everybody looks at this entrepreneurial spirit in a variety of ways. But it's important to remember that when you're coming up with an idea, you do need to walk through some form of a process. So, when we think of entrepreneurship, we think of an innovation. It starts with an idea. And then we have to start developing that idea, that invention. And we have to do our research. And that research bears out the ways that we might be able to enhance the product or service. So just like with the sticky note came in one size. And today it comes in 25 sizes. And people use it for all sorts of things. Or you could think of baking soda, a very primitive substance, mineral, that when used in baking helps things to happen the way they're supposed to, like cakes to rise and things like that. But it also can be useful to clean with. So when you're developing a product, you have to see a bigger picture of how that product might be able to be used. With an innovation, you have to introduce something new. And you have to remember that there's a competitive nature to an innovation. So there may be other people out there trying to seek and learn and submit ideas related to this same innovation. The question is, can you beat them in that competitiveness? So it's your job when you're thinking of innovations to think about new products, new services, new processes. Well, it's easy to understand new products. I'll make this and it'll make my life better. I'll provide this service because no one's providing it. When we talk about process, though, what we're talking about is how we get from one point to another. Let's say there's a manufacturing company and they're attempting to make a certain product. That product is very successful. But what if there's an engineer in there and they come up with an idea for process? Or let's take it a step further into our world of communication. Let's say that there is an industry out there, such as the airline industry, and this industry is having problems getting on time. What that means is they can't be pushed back from the gate soon enough. They're always late, and they need to be pushed back sooner so that they're meeting their on-time deadlines. Well, what if it is that the reason that they can't push back on time is that their process is not working well? How they get an airline customer from check-in all the way back to the gate, onto the plane, and up in the air, there may be a process problem that's involved. And those processes can be corrected. We do that through organizational communication efforts, through public relations efforts. We do that by identifying a process that might be able to improve the communication between one end of the process to the last end of the process. So, then we have other new technologies that exist and the development of those to make production more efficient. It's just like the cell phone. The cell phone is reasonably efficient, but there have been numerous things that have happened, and number one on those is probably the app. Any kind of app is available now. The app is designed to make things more efficient. Innovation characteristics also require you to identify new markets, whether they be nationally or globally or here at home. You have to look at every step of the way in your market because you want to be able to expand along the way. You have to extend the distribution of this new idea, product, service, process, technology beyond existing channels to be successful. And that's a goal that you'll have as an entrepreneur. You have to be creative. You have to generate ideas, and it's not always easy to generate ideas. But oftentimes, some people will tell you that it's easiest when you think about the simple. So, in your textbook, there's a suggestion related to promoting creativity. And that level of creativity is a 6-step process. And the first thing is to scan the environment and look and see what's going on in the environment with your particular product. Let's say you have an idea, and the first thing you want to do is see how that idea might fit into the actual environment. And then begin to expand on that idea, to think about all the different versatility things and variety of things that you could do with that particular product, service, or process that you have. And then it's not the circumstance that you must force to adapt to your process or idea or product. It's your product that's attempting to adapt to society and the circumstances around it. And once you recognize that it's your job to adapt, improve, and make process better, then it's your job also to revise all the components that exist inside that process. When you do that, you create a business opportunity. And that business opportunity will allow you to harvest all the benefits from that revised idea and also to develop a vision on where you want to go next. And that's just one of the ways to evaluate. It's called search, is the tool that exists. So it's scan, expand, adapt, revise, create, and harvest. And that is one approach to evaluating creativity ideas. Another method is to look at the advantages. What are the advantages of the proposed product or service? What does it offer the customer? And how does it build or extend something that we may already have that's available? Check out the limitations. What elements aren't really going to work? What are the flaws? And then, as we would say, using a SWOT analysis, what are the unique selling processes that exist, the unique selling proposition that exists? What is the uniqueness of your idea? Can it be substituted for something else already in the marketplace? Can it easily be imitated? And then opportunity. What opportunities emerge from the unique features you have identified? And that's called the ALUO, ALUO method of evaluating ideas. And then your book suggests that there is a third method of evaluation, and that's called Give Me Five. And Give Me Five suggests that you name 5 things you have observed as a consumer or employee in the branch of industry. Name 5 things this branch of industry should be anticipating right now. What's going to happen? Name 5 things that others would tell you about this branch of industry. Name 5 actions or types of business behaviors that participants in this industry should be considering. And then 5th, name 5 ideas that companies in this branch have not yet thought about or mastered. Those are ways to think about how you would evaluate your level of creativity. And then what you have to do, you have to move beyond just the evaluation of the idea and actually begin to test market that and put it into the form of a business plan. Thus, you need to be able to communicate an idea with others, and you need to also be able to think about how you're going to entertain yourself, ourself, anybody in the form of the communications industry. You've got to be creative. So, what are the origins of creativity? How could you expand on creativity? Well, there's some suggestions. One is to think about proximity. Group your environment by nearness and think about what's going on in that proximity area, what's closest to you. And then look at the similarities of these items to other items in that area of proximity. And then think about how those items that you might be thinking about could complete the circle, the advantage. What is it that's going to be brought to the consumer that is an advantage? And then think in terms of simplicity. What is the most simple way to do something? What is the smoothest way to do something? What is the idea that makes life easier? And then think in terms of, so what in the world? What in the world could it be that I could produce that nobody else has thought about? It really comes down to those moments where you're sitting there somewhere and you go, man, I wish I had this. If you had a statement and you said, I wish I had this, could you be the one to actually come up with the idea on this so that you could transform the way, the process, the world thinks in terms of that particular product? So, you must use creative problem solving. And creative problem solving suggests that you need to understand the underlying nature of a phenomenon. So, for instance, Mr. Fry, with his Post-it notes, he recognized with the Post-it notes that there was an issue. The issue was there were people that would rip off pieces of paper, and when they would rip off pieces of paper, they would put them inside books. And they would take those pieces of paper and put them in there so that they could go back and check things out. But sometimes those pieces of paper would fall off. But what if you had a product that would keep the paper from falling out. It could be that least resistant adhesive, such as Mr. Fry came up with for 3M. And then that would be the way to handle some stuff, right? That's understanding the phenomena. You're all about trying to think in terms of how can I fill the gap? How can I fill this inconsistency? There's a little break in the process. Can I fill that break with some kind of device, idea, process that can make it so that there's no break in that? And so when you get ready to start thinking in these terms of creative problem solving, then you need to think about those 4 things that I talked about, which is proximity, similarity, closure, and simplicity. They all are a part of the good creative problem solving process. Now, what do? This is probably some of the biggest stuff that you do. You use past experiences. You go and you do fact finding. You do problem finding. You do idea finding, solution finding, and acceptance finding. You got to get all of this stuff from what you've learned in the past in some ways, because you're learning. It's kind of like social cognitive learning theory. You're learning from what you have actually experienced, and you're learning from vicarious experiences, where if you watched others experience something and you don't really want to go through that anymore. It just comes down to a straight process of fact finding, problem finding, idea finding, and solution finding, and getting others to accept the findings that you've come to. So, creativity begins often with thinking of those things, and then moves to the idea of thinking outside of the box to solve the problem. It's also getting rid of the rigid control of thinking. Sometimes we think too hard. Yeah, go figure. We think too hard, and we're too afraid to take chances on problem solving. And that's one of the elements that has been one of the biggest issues in handling anything related to creative problem solving, is that most of the time people, in fact, the learning process suggests you need to stay inside the box. But the reality is the entrepreneur is someone who typically walks outside of the box. So, a good segue into discussing the novel interpretation of a well-known fact. The idea that a Post-it note could be a valuable tool if we just had a weak adhesive. Instead of thinking of only what is the positive adhesive, today you guys would probably add another element to this, and that would be the command strip. The command product by 3M. It goes past the weak adhesive to a strong adhesive, but an adhesive that does not pull the paint off of walls. Everybody loves them, right? What a smart, creative, novel way to handle a very simple problem, trying to keep nail holes and pull paint from the walls of your house by using a command command post type thing. There are different phases of innovation. There's ideas generation, and then from that idea generation, thinking about the most viable idea on how to handle that. And then what happens is you have to develop a coalition building to transform the selected idea into a reality. You have to truly begin the implementation and commercialization. There are countless ideas sitting on the floor of many, many offices all over the world. They were never implemented, they were never commercialized, and they never existed because of that. It's kind of like saying, do you hear the tree fall when there's nobody in the forest? Well, if you have an innovative idea and you never push it toward implementation and commercialization, it will never be seen or heard. So, linking innovation and entrepreneurship. Can you take on this innovation? And as conferences that I've gone to on commercialization, Uh, Experts suggest that the biggest step is taking that new innovation and adapting it and enhancing it so the public is willing to accept it. And the deal is you're constantly refining your product, you're constantly refining your service, you're constantly doing research. But you've got to not just to have the element of development, you have to have a marketing element. And it reminds me of a company here in Arkansas. A gentleman had a great idea, and he had probably over $1 million of federal dollars invested to an idea that he had. And he began working at getting the word out about his product. But what happened was that particular person, the inventor, was not the person that needed to be the one to market the actually creative idea. That inventor needed a partner. And so often in entrepreneurial type situations, there needs to be a partnership. I'll give you an example of a company that began working on software. And they had a certain kind of software, and it dealt with funeral homes. And software basically began as an accounting tool, but and that's about where it was. But there was a genius businessman that came along and said, well, wait a minute. It's not just about accounting at funeral homes. There's all sorts of services that we could offer. And as the world changed and as we developed into a web world, an internet world, this software developed into opportunities to do everything online in relationship to death. The deal is everybody does. So that particular gentleman needed a partner, a business partner, to exploit the very good ideas, because it's a really good idea. But you have to be able to link the innovation to the entrepreneurship, and oftentimes that means finding a business partner. Embedded entrepreneurship. Oftentimes there are people in the field that are those subject matter experts, and you need those people. And then you need the right people to help you get to your next phase, as we were talking about. Some people, really good business people, just don't come up with the ideas. And so you can kind of think of what happened with the partners of, let's say, Steve Jobs. You probably don't know him as well as you would know if Steve Jobs was still living. You might know about Mr. Cook, but otherwise you might not. But they were really partners all along. And one was a content person, another was the actual business type person. So you have to have technical skills and selling skills in order to do good with entrepreneurship. Well, can you be taught to be enterprising? I think you can be taught to be willing to step out on the process and the progression of introducing an idea. I think you can be taught the things that you would need to have in order to develop a business around a particular product or service. I think in some ways you can be taught some levels of creativity, because oftentimes people are so focused on inside the box that once you introduce skills to think outside the box, there might be another way to do something, and you begin to think more innovatively. Can you be taught to be more commercially aware? Sure. What about self-motivation? Can you be taught to be self-motivated? I think that's a skill that comes from within, but I also think it comes from encouragement, from mentorship, to become self-motivated. And there are many teachers that do all sorts of things in attempts to motivate students to do the best in their particular classes and that sort of thing. So I think you can be taught in many ways to be enterprising. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. There are advantages right now of stepping out and doing and taking hold of the idea that you have. Right now, there are advantages because you're accustomed to not having a lot of money. You're not risking things related to family and children for the most part. So yes, you can. And then senior entrepreneurship. You often see entrepreneurship at a very young and much older age. And in the middle, all that stuff with family and children gets associated with it. But in the end, senior entrepreneurship, those individuals have that money back. They have that money that they've saved. They're no longer having to spend all their money on their children anymore, and they have a lot of expendable income. And sometimes they just get tired of what they're doing and they want to do something different, and they see an idea and begin to invest in that particular idea. They have more connections, they have more knowledge, they have more money. Yes, you can. Now, the question is, once you produce a business plan, why could it be rejected? There are many different reasons. One is your whole management structure could be off. If you simply have you, most people are not going to invest just in you. There are reasons that people will look at your business plan and they'll go, well, the market doesn't suggest this. And so I'm not going to do this because the market does not suggest this. Sometimes a business plan is rejected because it's just going to take too long, or the investment is too large, or you haven't gone through the process of getting a patent or protection for the ideas that you have. And sometimes you just lack the technical expertise. But sometimes, what if you connected with 2 or 3 other people and you had all those expertise roll into one? In fact, sometimes if you had about 4 people, that business plan might just work because each one of you has a certain set of expertise that could be used. So, how to create the network? You've got to have business acumen. You've got to find financing. You've got to save money to show people you can save money and that you have money and that you're willing to stick your neck out there. You're willing to bet your car, your house, and everything in it that your idea is a good investment. You put all that stuff up for collateral. You work at networking with people. And that's one of my greatest concerns today is that students don't necessarily network with one another. And they don't see the potential of knowing this person or this person. And there's so many in classrooms that really don't even know the students that are sitting around them. That's your network. Those are the people you could go to. They're the ones that have the skills that could help you in your business. You need to work on having a social network capital building process, a place where you are finding people, because human beings are the ones that will make your business work, not just you. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's the search idea, the scan the environment, expand on the idea, adapt the idea to the circumstances, revise the components, create the opportunity, and harvest the revised ideas. And a second one is the ALU one that I just spoke about a few minutes ago. And what are the advantages of the service? What are the limitations? What's the uniqueness? And what are the opportunities that exist for you to propel your business forward? And of course, the Give Me 5, which I reviewed earlier as well. 5 things you have that you observe as a consumer or employee in the branch of a business. 5 things the branch should anticipate now. 5 things others would tell you about this branch of industry. 5 actions people in this business should be considering. And 5 ideas no one has thought about. That's who you are. You can evaluate those ideas and decide if you can go forward. What are the benefits of the innovation? 1, you're creating employment for people. You're creating wealth, not just for you, but for other people. You're introducing new products, new services, new ideas. You're opening new industries to help people in your community. You're paying it forward, people. You're creating regional development. You're creating competitiveness. And you're providing a consumer with choice and value.